And thank you everyone for joining the third Black Learners Matter webinar. And I would like to introduce our panelists for this discussion. So if you've attended our prior two, we generally start with some knowledge that's been in the form of a presentation. This time we have leaders here who can talk about their experience. So I'd like to introduce Michael O'Connor, Superintendent of Middletown Public Schools, and Peter Cohen, President of the University of Phoenix. Thank you both for joining us.
Thank you, Grant.
Thank you, Grant.
So when we were backstage just before starting, Peter said, "Hey, Michael, are you going to talk a little bit about the transition you're having now with school starting?" And that's exactly where we're going to start. Kind of with the school starting now, that's kind of a top of mind issue. So how are you beginning the year in light of the continuing pandemic, Michael?
Well, Grant, thank you for having me on here. And I'm looking at this in more of an asset mindset where there's more opportunity, where we could continue this level of strategic disruption, the disruption theory, or even a penetration on how we can start now personalizing learning for our students, especially when we start grounding equity and justice in a synonymous context. But what we're doing now is obviously we're moving to this hybrid model, right? But we're focusing on, the safety and health is the priority, the principles that we're grounding this design on. But when we look at it from an equity standpoint, ensuring that all of our students have the necessary broadband or, access points at home, ensuring that, we were already a one-to-one digital, one-to-one device with our students, but now we're ensuring that all of our students have that, and including wellness checkpoints to ensure that there isn't a digital divide or a digital gap within Middletown Public Schools, but also building the necessary professional capital, the capacity on how to be able to exercise blended learning methodologies, teaching students, whether it be in a face-to-face or online manner at the same time. And then also the safety, right? Ensuring that we follow the social distancing as well as physical distancing protocols that have been outlined by the CDC and the state. So making this shift was very quick, albeit it was necessary and an opportunity to be able to now have this disruptive model, whether it be from the instructional sense or whether it be for new architecture, to leverage equity and innovation at the same time.
So I love the idea that you said, hey, you start with asset mindset as opposed to a deficit mindset. Can you speak to that just a little bit?
Yeah, when I look at this, is insight brings this level of responsibility, right? And moving away from not just sympathizing on what has happened, but more of this empathy where we're looking at it from the standpoint of how can we use this as an opportunity to continue our vision. Our vision in Middletown Public Schools is unlocking the potential in all students. So, I always say that, educators are the only, or education is the only industry that can be able to move from a traditional brick and mortar instructional model to, this full remote distance learning model within a matter of 6 days, right? And teachers trying to be able to continue leveraging instruction, continue leveraging outcomes and strategies in a different way. So, we've been focusing on what can we do and what are the possibilities, right? We're in this stage of during COVID, I like to call it, where now we just have to just be able to look at, have this mantra of being flexible and also really being agile and have this embrace and experimentation living in this world. So, our practitioners and leaders have been doing a phenomenal job here. I think education in totality, making this shift and trying to figure out how do we get kids back into school, or how do we educate kids in the most safe manner that keeps everybody healthy.
Fantastic. And just as a side note, I see that some of the participants have said that the chat is disabled, but if you have questions, please shoot them into the Q&A. We'd like to also include your questions from the audience in the session. So Peter, I know you've been traditionally in an online mode, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the pandemic hasn't brought on changes to your operation. Have things changed due to COVID-19?
Yeah, thank you, Grant. Fortunately, we were 96% online before, so almost all of our students were online, but we still had about 4,000 students who were attending 20 campuses around the country. And so overnight, as everybody else, between a Friday and a Monday, we had to convert those students to an online synchronous format. So we used Blackboard Collaborate, and we kept them going. If they were meeting on Monday nights from 6 to 10, they're still meeting on Monday nights 6 to 10, which is different than our 96% of our online students who are in an asynchronous mode and who take advantage of the flexibility of time shifting and meet whenever they want to and turn in their assignments whenever they want to during the week. So we had that challenge for those kind of 5,000 students. We had to take about 3,500 of our staff and move them from our offices. We were all on a large campus in Phoenix. And over the weekend, everybody went home and began working at home, like many other companies around the country, and sort of making sure that you can continue to provide. And I love Michael's comment about empathy, because we talk ourselves about how we can be empathetic to our students, which really means being able to meet them where they are. And when you're considering the challenges that COVID-19 brought to families, trying to work at home, take care of their kids at home, and trying to still learn at home if they are going to school, huge challenges just in, fighting for the computer, fighting for the internet, fighting for the kitchen table, trying to find a quiet space to work. All of our staff had to do the same thing. So we had staff who were in nice offices before, and now they're working from the kitchen table, focused on their own family issues, but still trying to take care of all of our students. And they did a fantastic job of doing so. But as an employer, we had to make sure that we remained empathetic, and that we understood that our own employees were going through challenges as well as our students were. And I am pleased to say that we didn't miss a beat. Our students didn't miss a beat. Our students stayed in their classes like they were before. And so overall, we've experienced much less disruption than probably 95% of the universities out there.
Indeed. Well, thank you. Yeah, I didn't even realize that you held kind of in-person synchronous classes. Learned something. So learned something about that. But both of you have kind of highlighted change, and certainly that's been part of the disruption caused by COVID-19. But it's also kind of crystallized the social movement we're also living in with Black Lives Matter. And I'm wondering, within your own organizations, kind of what has this moment meant for the focus on Black and Brown learners?
Yeah, Grant, no, great question. I think that, the inequities have just became paramount. It was forefront. We would always talk about the inequities of Black and Brown students, whether it be through the myriad of gaps that we talk about. Now, they're just exacerbated itself, and then coupling an incident, this egregious incident that happened with George Floyd. So I think that now the conversations are not so much taboo, right? And I can speak specifically as being, an African-American executive, where I would be able to talk about this in spaces and people get uncomfortable, where I think that now we have to have this level of feeling comfortably uncomfortable in discussions in order to eliminate, whether it be microaggressions, whether it be colorism, whether it be redlining, that we see, and equities that have perpetuated itself now within this pandemic. I always state to my administrators, or whether it be teachers, is that this is a two-folded trauma issue that we're dealing with when students are transitioning back into schools, whether it be the trauma that has impacted them from the novel coronavirus, or whether it be the trauma that has impacted them or what they have seen on TV or personal experiences of racism. So now we got to deal with this two-folded or have this multi-varied analysis of how are we going to deal with these multiple variables of trauma that are coming back into our schools within a new architecture that our teachers have not necessarily been prepared for. So we're talking about this level, this multi-level of these conundrums that we're facing in education. But speaking specifically with Black and Brown learners, especially Black learners, we can't avoid the conversations, and we can't avoid that, you know, we have to be able to address their needs head on, and we can't be afraid to talk about it from the educator and the leader perspective about it. So I think that now it's just put on a forefront that more people, i.e. the Rainbow Coalition, is having these conversations, and it seems like it took a Black man to die in order for permission to have these conversations in these spaces. But I think that we have to be able to build on it for our students and our families.
Yeah, I would build on that, Michael, and say never let a good crisis go to waste. And the COVID crisis caused everybody to be at home in front of their computers, in front of their TVs. At the same time, we had 3 tragic events against Black people all in the course of 1 week, which frankly isn't all that uncommon. If you were to go to the week before and the week after, you had the same events happening. But the 3 of them happening at the time when everybody was in front of their computers and TVs, I think created a rallying cry, which was in a way fantastic, because this is something that we've needed to address for, you know, as long as America has been a country. And I've seen it addressed, you know, back in the 60s when I was growing up, and then it kind of dissipated, and seeing it addressed then again now, I think has been really, really valuable. And I'm hopeful that this time it actually sticks. For us as a university, it's really important. The majority of our students are Black and Brown. So we serve minority communities as a majority. So we've been very sensitive to the issues that they face throughout our history. And we have an Office of Educational Equity, which focuses specifically on making sure that we review our content and that it is as unbiased as possible, knowing that content written by third parties often has bias in it. We have a number of programs that we had instituted prior to this event taking place, and a number that we instituted after it started. So just a couple of those. This Office of Educational Equity routinely looks at our programs, our content, our courses, our faculty, and our practices to make sure that we do advantage Black and Brown people and disadvantaged people, including people with special learning differences and disabilities, who are also in our society somewhat underserved. Our provost office reviews all of our programs and courses routinely to see if they're including content that would teach history, for example, not from a white perspective, which is, again, I used to be in the K-12 space, and most history books are taught from a white perspective. Black and Brown people inside of our own university, we have employee resource groups. We have the African American Alliance Council for Excellence that focuses on issues that Black employees face. We have La Fuerza, which focuses on issues our Hispanic students face. We have one for LGBTQ students to focus on the issues they face. So we've always tried to look at sort of the larger diaspora of America and say, how can we help all of these people come together and embrace our differences and recognize them? I've had to, you know, recognize my white privilege. And I've done that publicly, and I've done that at our commencement programs. And for me, and I think as Michael pointed out, having these conversations is very uncomfortable. So we created something we call Inclusive Cafe. And every week we have an Inclusive Cafe, which is an hour-long Zoom session like this at noon, where we bring in guest speakers. I just asked Jeff Livingston if he'd join us for one of these, but we bring in guest speakers to talk about some aspect of inequity in society, whether it's gender bias, whether it's racial bias, whether it's any other form of bias, and have people talk about that in an open, live conversation where people, you know, have the opportunity to speak about those things that really matter to them. And I think we have a particular responsibility as educators, and as higher education, I know we have a responsibility. I was in K-12 before this. We have a responsibility to lead the charge. If educators aren't leading the charge for the change in this country, it is not going to happen. Yeah. All of us spend more time in education than anywhere else. And so I think we have an important role to play here, and glad to see the panelists that we're going to have coming up who are presenting solutions that will also help increase the equity across America.
Yeah, indeed. You know, I want to piggyback on that also, because I agree. I think educators have a large role to play. But, you know, both of you have touched on this issue of persistent problems, right? That persistent problem is racism in the country. And we've allowed ourselves as a country to tell the story that, well, you know, kind of if Black people were just educated in a particular way, this would go away. And the reality is data shows that Black people can't educate themselves out of the wage gap. Part of it is preparation, part of it is opportunity. And so part of the question I have to you as leaders of organizations, what efforts are underway to ensure opportunities for Black entrepreneurs to do business with your schools? Is that something that has been discussed?
Yeah, well, one quick comment on that. It's not a Black people problem. It's a white people problem. You know, Black people would be happy to have the opportunities that white people have. It's that white people in general have to give them those opportunities. I was talking to a female entrepreneur yesterday who has a great product and a great concept. And she said, you know how much funding goes to female entrepreneurs from venture capitalists? She said between 1% and 2%. She goes, so here I am, and I've got a great product, and I can't get anybody to listen to me. I would imagine Black females, it's even worse in terms of the opportunities that are made available to them. So I know we as an organization, one of the things we're looking at now is what does our vendor profile look like, and where we have opportunities to work with a vendor. I mean, unfortunately, a lot of our money goes to AT&T and to Salesforce and to Google and to Apple and companies that they are what they are.
You can feel free to hold them accountable too if they're getting your money.
We are.
So,
we boycotted Facebook in July because we were concerned about their policies around race and hatred on their platform. And I think they've made some improvements, and we will continue to hold them accountable. And if they don't make more improvements, we'll stop working with them. But we think it's our responsibility to look for entrepreneurs and for companies that can support our university, but are diverse companies. And so we've made that commitment. We just gave a challenge to the mayor of Phoenix along those same lines. Is Phoenix has its own challenges, both with police brutality as well as with regulations that disadvantage lower income communities and minority communities. And we presented them with a check for $100,000 and said, look, we want you to do research to figure out how you can improve the city. And we will vote with our feet when our lease is up, whether we stay in your community because you're committed to equality and social justice, or we're going to go to a different city when our lease is up because we don't want to live in a city where you are not committed to this type of justice. Fortunately, the mayor there, Kate Gaega, is very committed to racial and social justice, so she was enthusiastic about our participation.
oh, fantastic. Good to hear that there's accountability in vending. Michael, anything that you want to talk about from your
Yeah, no,
perspective?
Grant, I think that, you know, for entrepreneurs, you know, especially Black and brown entrepreneurs, this is an opportunity to really, I like to say, invade the K-12 space because we need to be more solution oriented. That's not just from a traditional business model or an analog operating model, I should say, because, you know, our industry has been, you know, operationalizing itself on this industrial model, but because of COVID, we have to move towards this, I like to say, digital business model that has this new value capture or value creation where now the operating model is becoming more digital and integrated, where solutions are going to have to be more technological, adaptive software, artificial intelligence. Now you're starting to see machine learning or this digital structure or systems that are going to be integrated into the K-12 space. So this is a perfect opportunity for entrepreneurs to start moving into the education space because we have to operate differently. You know, the way we look at education, how we educate students, how we look at Black and brown students, how we now have to look at these solutions to be able to now move the equity lens to this justice lens. And the only way we can start doing that now is start moving towards embracing experimentation, R&D and L&D practices in a traditional industry such as, you know, K-12 public education. So yeah, I mean, this is a perfect opportunity to really now start penetrating new solutions, new concept or solutions concepts that now we have to be able to embrace design thinking and move towards having external partners or extending the network effects, I should say, within this new integrated model of education.
That's fantastic. And I'm sure all the innovators who are going to pitch are grateful to hear that the aperture is opening up for solutions. So I know it went quickly, but we're going to wrap with one final question here. And again, we have some innovators who are going to come up and present solutions. We probably have others who are in the audience who are thinking about what they might address. So as a closing comment, kind of what are some unmet needs, you know, kind of within your organization or industry that you know, some Black and brown entrepreneurs, you know, in the audience might tackle?
You want me to open this up, Grant? Or
Yeah, please.
take it. Yeah, I would say three things, right? Data, analytics, and artificial intelligence, right? That is completely an outlier in education, right? When we talk about, you know, if we got entrepreneurs there that, you know, really know how to leverage L&D and R&Ds, where predictive modeling and forecasting around students, because, you know, we see the loss of learning gains for students or this exacerbated achievement gap. How can we use predictive analytics to be able to test new solutions and to really disrupt specific variants within the operating model or the architecture of education, and try new things, integrate new avatars or different type of solutions that are adaptive, so that now we're really personalizing learning for students, but also closing equity gaps because we're getting right to the zone of proximal development of where students need specific instruction. Practitioners need artificial intelligence and technology and be guided by data and analytics to make decisions that are going to impact student lives. So yes, this, like I said, this is the opportunity where now executives, superintendents, CEOs need to start incorporating the taboos of education, as I always called it. Data, analytics, deep analytics using big data, and also artificial intelligence.
Fantastic. All right, Peter.
I kind of have to laugh because if you were to look at my strategic plan, you would see 3 pillars of data connectivity, which means the data has to easily flow across the disparate systems that it comes from, whether it's your learning management system, your learning products, or your SIS, which is where you keep your student information, and data analytics, which is what you do with that data once you get it, so that you can improve outcomes. And I would add to the artificial intelligence, which is the other area that we currently use artificial intelligence throughout. One of the advantages we have is that almost all of our work takes place online, so we can capture how much time you spend, where you spend it, what you get right, what you get wrong, and leverage that data to create nudges and to create outputs in what we call predictive waves that help us determine when a student might be failing, when they might next fail, how they're doing, and then try to interact with them prior to that happening. But the last area that I would put on there is something we're working on called robotic process automation, which is how do you take those things that could be done by a machine and let machines do them so that human beings can spend their time on areas like empathy and social emotional learning where they add the best value. So that would kind of be the 4th area in addition to the data analytics and artificial intelligence that I would look at.
All right, fantastic. So areas that our innovators can begin to focus on. Well, again, I want to thank you on behalf of Black Learners Matter for participating in the panel. I'm sure the audience received a great deal of value. Thank you for sharing your experience.